The Great Smoky Mountains stretch across Tennessee and North Carolina like a green ocean of ancient peaks and hidden valleys. It's one of America's most beloved national parks, drawing millions of visitors each year who come seeking beauty, adventure, and connection with nature. But the Smokies hold secrets. In over 500,000 acres of rugged wilderness, people can and do simply vanish. And on June 14th, 1969, a 6-year-old boy named Dennis Martin disappeared so completely that even one of the largest search efforts in national park history couldn't find a single trace of him. This is the story of a Father's Day camping trip that became a family's worst nightmare, and a mystery that's haunted investigators for over 50 years. Dennis Lloyd Martin was everything you'd want in a 6-year-old adventuring buddy. Curious, energetic, and absolutely fearless when it came to exploring the outdoors. His father, William Martin, was an experienced outdoorsman who'd been taking Dennis on camping trips since he was old enough to walk. The Martin family, William, his wife Lois, Dennis, and his 4-year-old brother Douglas, had driven down from Knoxville for what was supposed to be the perfect Father's Day weekend at Spence Field, a popular camping area in the heart of the Smokies. Dennis wasn't just any 6-year-old. He was what rangers would call woodwise. He knew not to wander off trails, understood basic camping safety, and never given his parents cause to worry about his judgment outdoors. That's what makes what happened next so impossible to understand. They set up camp and were preparing lunch when they encountered another family, the Keys from Dixon, Tennessee, who had children around the same age. The kids immediately hit it off, and in the way that children do, they started planning a harmless prank on the adults. Here's where every parent's worst fear becomes reality. At approximately 2:30 p.m. on June 14th, Dennis and the other children decided to hide in the bushes and jump out to scare their parents. It was the kind of innocent game kids play 1,000 times during camping trips. Dennis ran ahead of the other children, disappearing into a patch of rhododendron bushes about 150 feet from the campsite. His father could see the bushes clearly. The other children were following behind Dennis. Everything was normal, playful, exactly what you'd expect. But Dennis never jumped out to scare anyone. The other children emerged from the bushes confused, asking where Dennis had gone. In the span of perhaps 30 seconds, the time it took for the other kids to follow the same path, Dennis had simply vanished. William Martin immediately began searching, calling Dennis's name, checking every possible hiding spot. This wasn't a case of a child wandering off while parents weren't paying attention. Dennis had been visible in a contained area just moments before he had disappeared. By 3 p.m., William knew something was seriously wrong. He hiked back to the nearest ranger station and reported his son missing. Within hours, what would become one of the most extensive search operations in national park history was underway. But Mother Nature wasn't going to make it easy. That evening, a massive thunderstorm moved through the area, bringing torrential rain and washing away any tracks or scent trails Dennis might have left behind. When I say this search was massive, I meant unprecedented. Over 1,400 people participated over the course of 6 days. We're talking about park rangers, local volunteers, FBI agents, military personnel, and search and rescue teams from multiple states. Helicopters crisscrossed the mountains. Bloodhounds were brought in from across the southeast. Teams of experienced trackers combed every ravine, every cave, every possible hiding spot within a 10-mile radius of where Dennis was last seen. The search wasn't just large, it was professional and thorough. This wasn't a case of well-meaning volunteers stomping around and contaminating evidence. The FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit was involved. Military search teams used grid patterns and sophisticated equipment. If Dennis was out there to be found, this operation should have found him. But 6 days of intensive searching revealed absolutely nothing. No clothing, no footprints. After the storm, no signs that Dennis had ever been in the area. It was as if he had simply been erased from existence. Perhaps the most heartbreaking were the false hopes. Searchers thought they heard a child crying from a remote ravine, but when they reached the location, they found nothing. A helicopter crew reported seeing what looked like a small figure moving through the forest, but ground teams found no traces. The Key family, who had been camping nearby, reported hearing what sounded like a child's scream around the time Dennis disappeared, followed by the sight of a disheveled man running through the forest, but this crucial information wasn't relayed to search coordinators until several days later, possibly too late to make a difference. In the 50-plus years since Dennis Martin disappeared, numerous theories have emerged to explain what happened. None of them are particularly comforting, and none fully account for the complete absence of evidence. The first theory is lost in the wilderness. The most straightforward explanation is that Dennis simply got lost and succumbed to exposure or injury in the rugged terrain. The Smokies are unforgiving, full of steep ravines, dense undergrowth, and areas where even experienced hikers can become disoriented. But this theory has problems. Dennis was wearing a bright red t-shirt that should have been visible from aircraft. The search began immediately, and the weather was clear for several hours after his disappearance. Most importantly, the search teams were thorough and professional. If Dennis had simply wandered off and died of exposure, they should have found remains. Theory 2 is that there was an animal attack. Black bears and wild boars inhabit the Smokies, and both species have been known to attack humans. A swift, silent attack might explain the lack of struggle or noise that other campers would have heard. Again, there should have been evidence. Even the most efficient predator would leave traces: blood, torn clothing, drag marks, or remains. The complete absence of any physical evidence makes this theory unlikely, though not impossible. There's the third theory: human abduction. This is where things get dark. The Key family's report of seeing a strange man running through the forest around the time Dennis disappeared has never been adequately explained or investigated. The description they gave was of a man who didn't look like a typical hiker or camper, someone who appeared to be fleeing the scene. If accurate, this could suggest that Dennis was abducted by someone who knew the area well enough to evade one of the largest search operations in park history. The timing would have been perfect for an abductor. The thunderstorm that evening would have washed away evidence and made tracking impossible. The remote location provided cover for someone who knew the terrain. Then we have Theory 4, the missing 411 connection. Dennis Martin's case is prominently featured in David Paulides' Missing 411 research, a controversial but compelling examination of unexplained disappearances in national parks. Paulides identifies patterns in these cases that traditional explanations can't account for. Disappearances in areas where the person should have been easily found, the complete absence of scent trails for tracking dogs, and the involvement of children who are too young to have wandered far on their own. According to Paulides' research, Dennis's disappearance fits a disturbing pattern. It occurred during a weather transition in a granite-rich geological area and involved a child with German ancestry, all factors that appear frequently in missing 411 cases. The theory suggests that something unknown, whether natural phenomenon, unknown predator, or something else entirely, is responsible for these disappearances. It's controversial, but it's one of the few frameworks that accounts for the complete lack of evidence. Then there's Theory 5. Perhaps the most conspiracy-minded theory revolves around the involvement of military personnel in the search operation. A team of Green Berets was deployed to assist, but they operated independently from other search teams and didn't coordinate their efforts with park rangers. Why would Special Forces personnel be involved in searching for a lost child? Some researchers suggest they weren't there to find Dennis, but to cover up evidence of something that couldn't be allowed to become public knowledge. When researchers have attempted to obtain files related to Dennis's disappearance through Freedom of Information Act, they've been told that records are either classified or have been destroyed. Why would information about a missing child case be classified decades later? Dennis Martin's disappearance changed how National Park Service handles missing person cases. New protocols were implemented for rapid response, better coordination between agencies, and more systematic search patterns. But 54 years later, we're still no closer to understanding what happened to Dennis Martin. His family has never stopped searching for answers, and his case remains one of the most haunting unsolved disappearances in national park history. What makes Dennis's case so disturbing isn't just the mystery, it's the implications. If a 6-year-old can vanish without a trace in broad daylight, witnessed by multiple people, and evade one of the most extensive search operations ever mounted, then what does that say about our understanding of these wild places we love to explore? Over the years, hikers in the Spence Field area have reported strange experiences, unexplained sounds that might be a child calling for help, brief glimpses of a figure in red moving through the trees. Are these genuine paranormal encounters or just psychological echoes of a tragedy that's never been resolved? Dennis' brother Douglas, who was 4 years old when his brother disappeared, has spent his adult life advocating for missing persons cases and supporting other families facing similar tragedies. He said that while his family has found ways to move forward, they've never found closure because they've never found answers. And that's perhaps the most heartbreaking aspect of this case. Not just the loss of a child, but the eternal uncertainty. Not knowing whether Dennis suffered, whether he might have survived if found sooner, or whether he's still out there somewhere waiting to be discovered. Dennis Martin was 6 years old when he disappeared, which means he would be 61 today if he's still alive. Somewhere out there might be a man who has no idea that thousands of people searched for him, that his family never stopped hoping, that his story has haunted investigators for over half a century. If this case has affected you the way it's affected me, please subscribe and share this episode. The more people who know about Dennis Martin, the greater the chance that someone somewhere might have information that could finally solve this mystery. And if you're planning your own adventure in the great outdoors, remember Dennis's story. Stay aware, stay together, and trust your instincts. The wilderness is beautiful, but it's also unpredictable in ways we're still trying to understand. Until then, remember Dennis Martin. Remember that some mysteries demand to be solved, not just for the sake of curiosity, but for the sake of the families who deserve answers. Because in the end, every missing person was someone's whole world. I'm Jorge, and this is Jorge's House of Horrors.